All right, y'all, we've seen some pretty wild shit recently. I mean, we look at the price of gold, we look at the price of silver, we look at the price of Bitcoin, and it's been pretty all over the place. So I just figured that I would set the record straight and talk to you guys about crypto today specifically and what my opinions are on it. This is not going to be financial advice, this is just going to be my perspective, and I'm going to be looking at it through a historical lens using the dollar and all sorts of other currencies very quickly. This isn't going to be a long, in-depth one, but rather just a few things I want to say about the current system, where I think it's probably going to go, what I'm doing, and it's very possible that at the end of the day, maybe I'm just holding an empty bag and I'm the one that gets egg on my face because there's internet record of this. But I don't care. I'm going to put it out there, and if I'm wrong, so be it. That's the whole point of having principles, is you stick by them, and if you're wrong, you learn, you try to move on. And yes, you might be broke from it, but you can also survive and get by and endure and learn from your failures. And who knows, even if you do go broke, I'm in my late 20s, I have plenty of time to recover in life, at least financially. This could be a funny story in 40 or 50 years from now, and I could be like, ha ha ha, I was so inept and silly back then, I can't believe I would have talked about Bitcoin like this. But you know what, I'm going to put it out there because I think there's validity to it, and I'm going to make my case for it. So without further ado, the gold price is $4,800. That's like kind of crazy, right? Because when we look at it from all time, about 15 years ago, it was at what, 1700 or so? Let's go to 2010. If we go to 2010 right at the beginning, it was roughly around $1,000. For a lot earlier than that, it was always like not even 300, 400 bucks. It was pretty stable there. But 5 years later, the price of it doubled to about $1,000. Fast forward, we start going through the 2011, 2012 times when we recovered from the recession, even though we all kind of know that things didn't really get better. At least growing up with my parents, it didn't seem like prices were going down and getting back to normal. It seemed to be the new normal. So, of course, through high school and college for me, gold started being $1,200, $1,300, kind of bouncing back and forth in 2017 until it started to get to the last moment in 2019 where it seemed to be $1,200, and then it raced up in 2019 and 2020 all the way to $1,800. It was $1,800. It's kind of hanging around $1,800 to 2022, 2023. It's still $2,000 roughly. And really all through 2023 it was $2,000, which is kind of incredible, hovering around there. And then right at January 2024 is where we start to see this huge jump in the last that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, which is it goes from 2,000 to just up in 2,600. And it goes down here briefly, but it's up, and you get to 2025 early. It's $3,000. That's a lot. And so this is where it gets kind of wild, right? We're going to look at it, and it's $3,000. It just went up $1,000 in a couple years. But the turnaround we saw on that $1,000, it at least took a few years. Now we're going to see it goes from $3,000 in 2025 to $4,000 by the end of 2025. It went up $1,000 fucking dollars in 2025. Over here, we saw this over here. I guess you guys can't see this, but it says it's about 300 right around here in the 2000s or so. It went up 3 times what it was 20 years ago. In such a quick amount of time, not even a year, it went up $1,000. Now, I'm not a gold expert. I am completely uninformed when it comes to like supply and demand of gold. I know that there's not really that much gold on Earth. I know there's only enough to fill up, I think, what is it, a few swimming pools worth of gold, which is outrageous to think about because that means that there's a very, very limited supply of this. But when you jump up $1,000 in a few years, that is like a huge indicator that like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on, right? So it goes from 3,000, it kind of hangs around here till August 2025 most recently. For 3 months last year, it was in the 3,300 range roughly. And then in August, September, October, it goes up to 4,000. And then fucking out of nowhere, it goes all the way up to $5,000 in 2026. So what does this really mean? Gold having gone up this quickly, this fast, is attributed to a few things in my opinion. Most of it is the government amount of printing that went on during COVID. Of course, isn't going to be immediately hit with inflation, but it takes probably a few years to do it on that massive of a scale for things to readjust accordingly, and gold has gone up a shitload as we saw in the last few years. Is the price of gold going to be going down? I highly doubt it. Maybe it will. I could be totally wrong. I'll get egg on my face because my public perception here is at risk with me and my 70 subscribers. But I don't think it's going to go down because we're in this cycle of inflationary infinity where it's just going to keep getting printed and printed and printed until it's like the Mongols where it just goes to hell. And there's no reason to stop printing either. It's going to take something else before anything would ever stop with the whole printing press. If you can go all the way to the printing press and keep pressing Control P with no restrictions on it, why wouldn't you? So overall, again, this is just my amateur opinion, but it feels like gold is being readjusted because there's so much fucking money out there, and there's been so much printing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. Okay, let's take a look at silver now. We can see that silver in the 2000s over here. You guys can't see this, but it says it's about, oh yeah, you can see it's about $5. It hangs around this area. It's $5 for a thing of silver. You go to the 07, 08, it starts to be $17. It went up 3 times in price. And then it shot back down to $11, and it never really looked back. So I can't really explain this silver going up to 2020, 25 here. It gets stuck at 47 for 1 day or 1 week in 2011, and then it starts going back down a lot more And I think silver is a lot more volatile than gold is, as far as I understand. But 2020, it hangs around in really throughout all the 2010s in $16. Right at 2020 with COVID, you start to see that it's going up to $27. And that's been the norm since we ended the 2020s. It's really been $27 and no less. If you look at this line all right here, it's never less than $27. And it's hanging 2020s and mid-20s. And then 2024, it finally hits $30. And so for the next year or so, it hovers around 2025, 32. This is where things are going to start to get crazy. As last July, it went to $40, and since then, it really has not looked back. As all throughout November, it was skyrocketing, and December is when we saw it hit in the 70s, and it got up to an outrageous 105. I think for one day it was 120, if I'm not mistaken. It's not showing it here, but silver is at a ridiculous high at $74 here. And so again, I think a lot of this has to do with like the money printing. I think that it's in comparison to gold, obviously not as expensive. It's like the poor man's gold is what you've seen. But silver also has industrial uses, and it's a little bit different. So when you look at silver's industrial uses, it does make it more in demand, I guess, to be used in the economy because it's more valuable than gold is. And I also think that the supply of it is infinitely more than gold. So when other places, I think there's been like supply and demand things, like certain governments won't let others mine in places, and that kind of has to do with it. Again, very amateur opinion in silver. But here's the thing, we know that there's been a ton of money printing, and silver will always be like silver unless we have like a meteor come from outer space and like a ton of gold and silvers on it. All of a sudden, the supply and demand of it is just like crazy. The one time that I did find interesting, actually, in a book called The Great Wave by David Hackett Fisher, was one of the craziest gold inflation times we've ever seen in human history was when the Spanish were doing a lot of gold mining and whatever in the South Americas, and so they would bring it back to the Spanish, and all of a sudden the gold that was already there got displaced because now the supply is way more, and it's being artificially inflated because there's all this new gold. Even though it's from the South America, it was getting implemented into the Spanish economy, and so artificially it drove the price of gold down because there was way too much gold. When you have too much of something, the price of it goes down. Anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about silver here, not gold. I think with the industrial uses, it's going to be more volatile. You still have to have it in computers. Again, these are tiny amounts of silver. You don't need a ton of it, but it is important for the, I guess, conductivity or something like this in certain like appliances and such. So there's industrial uses to it, and I think certain governments do or don't let others mine in there, and that has an influence on it. But again, the angle I'm coming at this from is money printing, and if we continue to keep printing money, well, if there's more amounts of dollars and there's an equal amount of silver, roughly, guess what's going to happen to the price of silver? The price of silver goes up because there's too many dollars to combat it, and the people that have the silver can get more for it. And so finally, this is probably why a lot of you have looked at this video, is we get to the price of Bitcoin. As you can see, Bitcoin started out 5 years ago at $46,000, and it kind of crashed to 32,000. It went back up to about 60 over here, and then it died over here, and it looked like 16,000 during 2022, and since then it's been crawling up then, and it went up to 41k, and it hasn't looked back since at the end of at the beginning of 2024, and it skyrocketed with some various ups and downs all the way to an astonishing $125,000 per Bitcoin. And right now it's crashed all the way down to 65,000, so half of what its high was. And I'm going to tell you my opinion on Bitcoin. Alright, quick editor note from the future here. The next section is going to be about Bitcoin, of course, but it's going to be a little bit repetitive because this video was not scripted. And so I went out of order, so as like I'm going along halfway through, let's say, one section about Bitcoin, something will pop into my head and then I'll kind of start speaking about it. So this isn't filmed like chronologically, and it's a little bit out of order. So if you get the feeling like, oh man, this guy already mentioned this, it's going to be because of that. So give me a little bit of leeway. I tried to put things in the description to the best of my ability so that it could be navigated easily by you guys. But overall, there's good stuff, and yes, I will beat it over your head that the US dollar sucks. I almost forgot to put this in, but as someone who doesn't really use Twitter much, once in a while I will look at stuff on Twitter, and I've looked at Bitcoin recently on there, and my god, the conversations on it are so polarized. The amount of hate that Bitcoin gets is absolutely astronomical, and I guess only time will tell whether those haters are right. My god, it's like every time I see a hateful comment about like, oh, Bitcoin sucks, you guys are fucking morons. People always dance a jig whenever the Bitcoin goes up, and it's like, you guys are morons. Well, it's like these people will insert the US dollar as being like the thing that is like the unconquerable, defensible, totally solid backed currency. And so a lot of the time on Twitter, what you have to do is, well, ignore them. And there's so much shit out there on the internet. And again, as someone who doesn't use Twitter, I'm not all that exposed to it. But man, just seeing these little snippets of when I look for gold and silver and all this on Bitcoin, Jesus Christ, there is so much hate out there on Bitcoin, it's insane. So, time will tell us who's going to be right. Hopefully I'm on the right side of things. But hey, if I'm wrong about Bitcoin, and the US dollar is the one that perseveres, and say, hey, I was wrong, I got scuffled for a few $1,000s, I will happily be like, hey, I was wrong. You guys were right. My bad. I thought I had a calculation going on here where the US dollar was impossible to back. And little did I know I was wrong. So if that's the hill, and this is the hill I'm going to die on, if that comes to fruition, so be it. But I would much rather at this point take my chances on Bitcoin and gold and silver rather than put all my fucking hard work and labor into US dollars, which can be printed into oblivion. Alright, so what's the point of Bitcoin? Like, what are my beliefs on it? Again, this is not financial advice. None of this video should be financial advice. It's just my personal opinion. I'm going to make my case for it. You're welcome to do what you want with that information. You can tell me that I suck and I should walk the plank and I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm going to try to make my case regardless, especially in today's day and age with a more and more corrupt government. So when it comes to Bitcoin and you can talk about other cryptos, but I'm just going to stick to Bitcoin for this video. The whole point of it is it's like a box. In today's day and age, we have a government that prints money infinitely. It's shot up so much to the point where the price of gold and silver in the last few years has gone absolutely apeshit. Gold went up $1,000. The general public doesn't really think much about it. And yes, you see certain news outlets talking about it. I'm talking about like the non-mainstream outlets. I'm talking about people on YouTube and such. But these are indicators of an economy not being healthy. And it's not like we're going to see gold go back to, $500 and silver back down to $5 like it was 30 years ago. It's just not going to happen. And this is what happens when you remove the gold standard. You give the government the infinite power of money printing. And so they don't have to be financially responsible whatsoever because they can just hit Control P at the end of the day. They steal from you through the silent and invisible hidden tax that is inflation. Of course, human beings are terrible at understanding this because we're very much better at seeing the seen versus what is unseen. And this is one of these unseen things where they kind of pull the sleight of hand trick. And because the general public is distracted with like celebrities and oh boy, the Super Bowl is coming and we better watch that, rather than looking at things that actually matter, this is not going to get fixed. And until we fix that, things are just going to continue to be the same over and over again. So gold and silver have always been the anti-inflationary hedges that you use, because those are real money. Of course, silver has its industrial uses and gold has its very limited supply and excellent store value uses. But the difference with Bitcoin is it's kind of in the same ballpark where you can't just counterfeit the supply you can with a printing press. See, Bitcoin was kind of made into like a box, right? There's only like, 21 million or so of them, and they're all within a box. You can't print more Bitcoins. Once the formula is made for it, it's not able to be manipulated from the outside because the blockchain, from what I understand, continues to put up additional transactions, and those transactions are permanently etched into the code itself or something like this. Again, my understanding of this is far from perfect, and please, if I'm wrong, do correct me in the comments. But because Bitcoin cannot be printed and it can't be added, the supply that was made is the only amount of supply we'll ever had. Like the supply that was made is the finite amount of supply, and it can't be manipulated, it can't be increased. That is the coded supply that will only ever exist, and every time you use it, a little bit more gets shaved off of each transaction. So therefore, each additional Bitcoin will be worth more because the supply of it is always diminishing because that's how it was coded, and some of it gets burned. So when you have this box and it says that nobody can print any more of it, it's highly attractive to people who are financially responsible because they don't want to deal with people who are inflating currency supplies all the time. In the average person's mind, in the general US public, they think that the US dollar is extremely stable, and yes, it goes through swings and such, but it will always be around, and that the dollar is like immune to corruption in a lot of ways. And for whatever reason, people think that it can't happen the way that has happened in Venezuela and all sorts of other cultures that have just hit the infinite money printer like the Mongols did it. It's an excellent way to take all of the power that's available through using currency as a weapon and printing more of it, and putting that aside and saying, look, you can't manipulate any more of it. This is a stable, certain amount of supply. If you can't make it work, too bad. That's what the beauty of it really is. Again, my personal view is at some point the US dollar is going to explode. It might not get to as bad as we saw things, or as rapid in Weimar Germany in the 1920s, which is the example everyone uses. But trust me, I've met plenty of people from Venezuela. I know what they've dealt with the Bolivar down there. And things were so bad in Venezuela that they had to introduce a second generation of Bolivars, because they had to keep so many zeros on the first set of Bolivars that the second set was kind of like, okay, if we say one second generation Bolivar is worth 10 million of this, and this one gets super inflated, so the amount of zeros they have, I mean, at some point it's just like not even a real number. Again, going back to it, the population of the US thinks that this is not possible and it can't happen here, right? Well, a lot of things in the last 5 to 10 years have really pointed at things accelerating and the currency getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And at some point, the rest of the world's going to say, you know what? I've had enough of this shit, right? We're not going to trade things in the US dollar anymore. And that's why we've had a lot of stability here, is because we forced people to use the US dollar. You have to do a lot of transactions in the US dollar. And as a US citizen, of course, it's been a nice life for the last 30, 40 years. But the rest of the world, if they could change it, they absolutely would. But, we have the benefits of being the world's superpower right now. now. And unfortunately, we've squandered it using the US dollar. So at some point, I think that we've overextended ourselves. We've shown proof that the US dollar is not really going to be any more stable. And if the US dollar is going to get any more stable, it's certainly not going to do it anytime soon from the things we've seen. Gold has been going up. Silver's been going up. Those two have had serious price shocks. Bitcoin's in a different category because it's electronic and whatever. And the price of it's very random to me. But I can tell you this. The general public has been duped into asking this question. Is Bitcoin legit? Should we really use gold and silver as things, or should we use the US dollar? And we're looking at it, the general public looks at it from a backwards point of view. If you look at it from the point of view that I'm using, it's saying, okay, is the US dollar legit here? Is it getting stronger? Is it getting weaker? Is it getting printed into oblivion? Is it being abused by people in power? And as a result, is that every dollar that I earn working at a hard job going to be stronger or weaker against currencies and against things that can't be printed? Let's not forget, when this whole thing began, the whole purpose of currency notes was that you could trade it in for gold. And even though gold was a pain in the ass to carry around all the time, the dollar would be kind of like the IOU. Well, since we've lost that system, now you have to trade in like 4,800 IOUs to the bank, and then you can get one piece of gold. And trust me, things aren't going to get better. So in my opinion, the US dollar is getting worse and worse, and is getting weaker and weaker. And at some point, we're going to have to really jump ship. I can tell you this, if you have like some ridiculous amount of cash lying around, if you have a ton of money in the bank, you got to try to get rid of it and put it into something that's like tangible. Whether it could be like real estate, it could be gold, silver. I mean, you could use it as Bitcoin, but you've got to try to get rid of it because this is going to get really, really nasty. And I could be wrong here. Things could be getting way better in the near future, and I just am mistaking it for people printing money, and it's just me just with like a total bias, and I should walk the plank for lighting fire under people's feet right now. But I'm trying to tell you this from everything I've seen, just like I said in my other video, things are probably going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. We're going to see crazier and crazier shocks because this is what happens when you print a bunch of money and you flood the economy with tons and tons of cash, and paper notes don't really mean anything and aren't, because they're not backed up by things. And so people would rather use the gold and silver, things that are finite, intangible, and not printable. And we're going to even start putting money into Bitcoin because that is not printable, because it is in the box of, I say that you cannot have more than 21 million Bitcoin supply. So the real question we want to be asking is the US dollar legitimate? Does it have its righteous place on top of the world as the top currency? Or should we be starting to look to jump ship and put it into gold and silver, or like Bitcoin, which is not printable? I have put some money into Bitcoin myself, and I can tell you why. I'm very, very nervous about the US dollar. Things have not gotten better for me in the last 10 to 15 years. Things have gotten way more expensive, especially in the last 5 years. The government is unrestrained and continues to print. So even though maybe, and again, my understanding of Bitcoin is quite amateur. Again, it's a limited amount of supply. It puts, every transaction is put on a ledger, so it's like decentralized. That's one of the biggest points about Bitcoin too, is it's a decentralized cryptocurrency. It means that nobody is holding the power lever, and that even though it's very slow, every 50 transactions or so put into this box. And once that box is in there, it is coded into the giant public Bitcoin ledger, and it cannot be removed, because that is how it works. And it takes, yes, it does take a while. That is the cost of having something that's decentralized. If you have something that's centralized, kind of like a normal paper currency, people can go in the middle of the night and print as much as they want. And that would be the case with something like, I think, XRP, because that's centralized, and they can do whatever they like with it. And they hold a bunch of it, and I think Ripple Labs holds a bunch of it in their own portfolio. But Bitcoin can't be really held by anyone as a hostage, and you can't go in and just start like typing numbers that make it like go in. Of course, maybe we've read it all wrong, and maybe some people have been wrong, and I'll go down with the ship on that one. But I can tell you this, the US dollar is not legit. It is a very, very weak currency, and it's getting weaker and weaker. The price of gold and silver should not be doing this, where they're jumping up thousands of dollars, and $50 sometimes having their amount in the case of silver, especially after we've printed all this money. So when it comes to Bitcoin, I am not going to be all in on it, but I've put some money into it because I don't trust the US dollar. I think it's going to continue to get printed, and as we have we're paying $1.2 fucking trillion on interest, as I showed you guys in that one video with Dave Smith. That's just interest. We're not getting any benefit out of that. It's just interest. So we have a fiscally irresponsible government, and you're trying to tell me I should believe in their currency, the US dollar? You got to be out of your fucking mind. I would rather, at some point the carpet will be pulled out. I think a lot of, if worst case scenario, if the dollar gets super inflated, people like my dad who have like an okay pension and like a huge 401k and all that stuff, where it's like, ooh, I put my whole life's work into 401k. I was using the company match for a while. If inflation goes absolutely apeshit in the next 10 to 15 years, my dad's going to be looking at his like 401k and being like, okay, I have a nice amount of money in there, but that's not going to be able to buy me shit, because the cost of shit has gone way the fuck up. And so it doesn't really matter. It's all relative. Ooh, I have $400,000 in my 401k. Ha ha ha. Well, if a fucking loaf of bread costs $20 because inflation just absolutely skyrocketed, well, that 400k is going to disappear pretty fucking quickly. So with us not trusting the US dollar, people like myself who have looked at history, who have looked at currencies like the denarius from Rome and how they kept inflating and putting less and less silver in each additional denarius unit, we see the direction this is headed and we start saying like, okay, the currency is the last thing you want to be holding if shit hits the fan. You want to have something else. I'm okay with putting money into Bitcoin because I do not trust the US dollar. I do not trust our US government to reduce the amount of money supply that they've put in. They have too many obligations to pay unfunded liabilities. It's like, what, over 200 trillion? We have $38 trillion in the national debt. There is just too much stuff going on. We have to pay off too much stuff. Social Security is going to go broke. Medicare and all that jazz is so expensive. Of course, the Obamacare has not been helpful with that either. We just have so many obligations we've made and promises we've made as the government. The dollar is probably just going to go bankrupt at some point. Or even, if you want to look at me and be like, oh, it's never going to go broke. You're wrong, gringo. Ha ha ha. It never went broke. Well, there's no business. If it costs $100 for a loaf of bread or $50 for a loaf of bread, we're not really winning by the dollar sticking around. I just went to HEB yesterday, and it costs like $70 to get a few pounds of meat. I mean, what the fuck is this? So, again, not financial advice, but I am telling you the US dollar sucks, and if it gets... I would love to be wrong. I want the US dollar to be strong, but if they're going to continue to do what they're doing, they're going to eventually destroy the currency, and people who are left holding all these US dollars are probably going to be the ones that are going to be suffering the most because they didn't see the inevitable danger of all these things. And at least if we put our money into Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency that is decentralized, we at least have a chance to move on. I can tell you this, it is much worse to have all your labor and hard work represented by a currency and pooled up all together in a giant stack of cash, whether it be a 401k or whatever, because at some point this is all going to go wayside, and gold and silver jumping up like this is very dangerous and certainly not the mark of a stable dollar, as you would like to say. So that's my point. I think the US dollar is a piece of shit. I said this in my other video, but if you can get out of the dollar, try to get out of it any way you can. I'm putting some money into Bitcoin. I think it's hit a pretty fair low. It probably couldn't go lower, so I'm saving up a little more just in case it goes even lower than this. And again, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe the dollar recovers and the Bitcoin just ends up being a giant Ponzi scheme, which is entirely possible. I don't think it's the case. But there's no worse Ponzi scheme than the currency we're using right now. This is just inevitable that things are just going to get worse. Like, it's not possible unless we make serious changes or reforms. Like, it is mathematically not going to happen. So, at least if you're going to spin the wheel, you might as well spin it on Bitcoin, the decentralized cryptocurrency, or you could put it into gold and silver, and that's probably safer as well. I guess my risk assessment would be gold is probably the safest, silver being pretty volatile, but still currency and usable, and there'll always be demand for it. Bitcoin is kind of a gamble, because in the age of computers, currency will probably get computerized or something, but everyone knows the US dollar is not going to last this long. In the current history of currencies, the activities that the government and the things that they have to pay back is just absolutely catastrophic. And at some point, it'll just destroy or at least seriously castrate the dollar. And it's not like it's already not been castrated. The currency right now is absolutely pathetic. So I would rather put my money into Bitcoin, and there you go. That's what I said. It's the 2 cents. Not financial advice, but my God, I'm getting out of the US dollar if I can. Or I will die fucking trying. So there you go. That's the end of the video. I've made this unscripted, as you can tell, and so it's probably not the most organized, but I hope I got the point across. The US dollar is a bad bet. You don't want to hold on to it. It's just an IOU for gold, and now that they said that you can't even turn it in for gold anymore, it's unfortunate, but this is the consequences of their action. If you can get into holding some sort of gold and silver, I highly recommend you do it. Put some money into Bitcoin. It's very expensive now, but it might be more expensive in the long term to not have Bitcoin. You never really know. This is the gamble that I'm putting on. This is my educated guess given what I've seen about currencies. And hopefully you learned something or took something away. Again, my understanding of crypto is not amazing, so if you can make any sorts of corrections, please don't be afraid to let me know in the comments. It is confusing because it's not like you can just like pick it up and they're basically trying to replace the currency with Bitcoin. So it's not like you can just like amateurly pick up Bitcoin like, oh yeah, I can get it in 2 seconds. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So anyway, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time.